This is Surfing Through Cinema. I'm your host, Hawaii Harry. Today, I'll be discussing the next film for Disney Week. Based off the plays and books by J.M. Barrie, this episode is all about the Disney classic Peter Pan. Okay, so some technical details about Peter Pan. This is the last time that all 9 old men worked together. Now, the 9 old men were some of Disney's finest and greatest animators. They're known for developing the 12 principles of animation, which many animation studios still use to this day. And after this, a lot of them retired. In one instance, one of them, Fred Moore, he was in a car accident, and unfortunately, he passed away as a result of that. So this kind of led to a lot of them leaving the studio, a lot of them not wanting to be there anymore. But yeah, this is the last time the whole gang was together. Okay, another technical detail. This is the last time RKO distributed a Disney movie. And the reason being because Howard Hughes, the famous Maverick business owner, he took over RKO, and his unorthodox methods of running a business made Disney decide they don't want to work with them anymore, and they went independent and created their own distribution service. Their own distributing company called Buena Vista, which is the title they used until 2007, is now called the Walt Disney Productions Company. And then the last technical detail, to keep with tradition of the play, Hans Conried, he played both Hook and George Darling. So in the original plays, because in the original play, of course, it was the same actor on the stage, so he would change his costume between Mr. Darling and Captain Hook. Well, in this case, it was a voice actor, and even the characters kind of have a similar design. They both have black hair, kind of mean personalities, and it's kind of almost Captain Hook is kind of almost an exaggeration of Mr. Darling, which kind of leads to the idea of, is this movie just a dream, or did they really experience these things? Or did the Darling children really experience these things? All right, so now we'll get into the plot. So the Darling children, Wendy, Michael, and John, they follow Peter Pan to Neverland. And Wendy, she'd been telling the boys stories about Peter Pan for quite some time now, and much to the dismay of her father, George Darling, who thought it was all nonsense and that the children and that Wendy was too old now to be in that bedroom with those boys. So he said, tonight is the last time you'll spend here in the nursery. And then Peter Pan and Tinkerbell come along and say, let's go to Neverland, because in Neverland, you'll never grow up, which all the children are very excited about, especially Wendy, because she doesn't want to grow up. And while they're there, Wendy causes frustration with Tinkerbell, and Tinkerbell is very, very jealous because Peter Pan kind of shows interest in Wendy. And while they're flying down to Peter Pan's base, Tinkerbell beats them there and tells the Lost Boys, who are Peter Pan's group of men, well, group of boys, I should say. She orders them to shoot down Wendy, say she's a bird. And, they believe Tinkerbell, they try shooting her, they try killing her. But then Peter Pan saves her and, totally is really mad at the boys. And then he banishes Tinkerbell forever from his presence. And so she flies away. And then she's discovered by Smee, who brings her to Captain Hook. And Captain Hook kind of schemes with her, but she didn't realize that his goals were not to, get rid of Wendy and all them, which he does try and do. But his real goal was to kill Peter Pan. And so Captain Hook, he kidnaps the Darling children and the Lost Boys, and then leaves a present for Peter Pan, which turns out to be a bomb. And Tinkerbell realizes this, and she races and just in time saves Peter from the explosion. And so because Peter Pan is now escaped, he now goes and fights Captain Hook, and he defeats Captain Hook. He ends up getting chased by the crocodile again, and this crocodile early on, that didn't happen in the movie. Peter Pan cut off Hook's hand, and the crocodile ate it, and so the crocodile is wanting more of Captain Hook. And throughout the movie, crocodile's chasing him. So he gets his wishes, and he starts chasing Captain Hook at the end of it. And now Peter Pan, the Lost Boys, and the Darling Children, they now have Captain Hook's ship. And so with the use of pixie dust, they're able to sail back to London to drop off the Darling Children. And the Darling Children's parents come home, and the children relay the whole story to them. And of course, the parents don't believe until they look out the window and they see Captain Hook's ship flying in the sky. And then they realize that the children were true. The children were telling the truth, and that there really was Neverland, really was a Peter Pan. And then the father, he says something to the lines of, he remembers that ship when he was a very young boy, which gives the impression he was probably one of the Lost Boys. All right, so that's the plot to Peter Pan. I'm going to go on a break real quick, but first, here's a message from our sponsor.
This podcast is brought to you by Anchor. If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. Here's how. It's totally free. There are tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast from your computer and even your cell phone. But that's not all. Anchor distributes your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many, many more. You can even make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. Anchor is everything you need to make a complete podcast all in one small place. So go on and download the Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started today.
Okay, so now that we're back from our break, I'm going to get into some critical views, my personal views on Peter Pan. All right. So back in 1953, when the movie was released, the New York Times said it had lack of faithfulness to the original play. And yes, they admitted that the animation and character design and the music was really good, but they felt it wasn't really, it didn't really live up to the storyline. They kind of made their own storyline and weren't connected to it at all. There are many reasons for that, budget constraints and amount of time they had. Plus, they wanted to make it more appealing to children because the original storyline is pretty dark. Disney didn't want to go into the dark side of it. They kind of made it a lot happier than the real story is. And so, as a result, though, many critics found, including New York Times, that it lacked faithfulness to the original storyline. All right. It has an 81% on Rotten Tomatoes, and with critics and reviewers saying they, love the characters and love the storyline, and but they feel music isn't up to par. And then the third critical point, it's been criticized in recent years for the negative depiction of American Indians. And so as a result of that, on Disney Plus, there's now a disclaimer stating the Walt Disney Company doesn't hold these opinions and that this is an outdated depiction of them and in no way was right then and isn't right now. And so because of that, a lot of people heavily criticize it and kind of miss the good parts of the storyline. All right, so that kind of leads into my personal views. So I really like the duo of Captain Hook and Mr. Smee. I think they're hilarious, especially Captain Hook. He's very flamboyant, very kind of crazy, and like I said earlier, an exaggerated version of George Darling, who kind of seemed more of a tough guy, but a little ridiculous. But Captain Hook is definitely an extreme version of George Darling. And I liked how they kept with the play a little bit by having the same voice actor for both the characters. And then Mr. Smee, he's a really fun, bumbling doofus. The scene in particular I really like is when he's trying to shave Captain Hook and a seagull comes along, lands on Captain Hook's towel, and he thinks he's shaving the Captain Hook's face. Then he thinks he cut off his head. It's pretty funny. I think they're a really good duo. Then my second personal view, I honestly don't like Peter Pan himself. I think he's kind of arrogant and annoying and hard to like. Um, but maybe that's kind of the point because he's in this world where you don't have to grow up. There's no real rules and no parents telling you what to do. And so maybe we're not really supposed to like Peter Pan. Maybe initially we are. Maybe that's just a sign I'm an adult now, that I kind of side more with the parents than I do with Peter Pan. I think the music is some of Disney's most memorable, in particular Second Star to the Right. That's a really, really good song. And yeah, I think they did really good with that. Okay, so those are my thoughts and feelings on Peter Pan. Next time, I'll be reviewing the first film for Cinephile Week. And for those who didn't hear, Cinephile Week is going to be movies such as In the Mood for Love, 2001: A Space Odyssey, ones that aren't necessarily critically acclaimed, but are more artistically and um, more known in the film community versus the general audience. And now some movies will be general audience, but not necessarily for the United States. And so for the first film, it's going to be a classic Akira Kurosawa film that has inspired many films, such as The Magnificent Seven, The Avengers, Blade Runner, and even A Bug's Life. I'm, of course, talking about Seven Samurai, starring the ever great actor Toshiro Mifune, who I last discussed about in the Hidden Fortress episode of Surfing Through Cinema. Thanks everyone for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe to my channel, Surfing Through Cinema, on YouTube, as well as following me on Instagram. And make sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcasts to keep up with Surfing Through Cinema. All right, well, until next time, this has been Surfing Through Cinema. I'm your host, Hawaii Harry. Take care.
Thank you for listening to Surfing Through Cinema. Make sure to check us out on Facebook at Surfing Through Cinema with Hawaii Harry and on Instagram with Surfing Through Cinema. We also have a website, www.anchor.fm/Surfing Through Cinema, where you can learn more details on upcoming episodes and on past episodes.